Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to talk about Portworx and Amazon EKS and how it forms a modern platform for applications. Joining us also today will be Eric Ewan from Amazon Web Services and Andy Gower from Portworx. First, I just wanted to talk for a minute about cloud in general. So starting with the ideal, really what we're, sort of the customer journeys that we're that we're seeing today. This is kind of what we are working towards in all of the platforms that we're architecting. Number one, you want to make sure that platforms are well aligned to workloads, using the right tool for the job. Number two, cloud strategy is intentional and documented. So many times we see applications that are developed in the cloud, developers that go out and do shadow IT and swipe a credit card and start somewhere and then aren't able to scale or have some security concerns. And it becomes really hard to mitigate that once they're already out there. Another area that is generally overlooked at the start of a cloud journey is cloud governance. We want to make sure that there are controls in place so that the cloud platform can be most secure and well run. The fourth is cloud costs overall. A lot of times we find that cloud costs are not well understood going into a cloud journey. This is an area that actually we see customers coming to us asking for help trying to get a handle on what's going out to cloud and how their cloud is managed to be most efficient. Fifth, the cloud or hybrid environment is appropriately flexible and scalable. Again, when applications are built, we want to make sure that the platform and the application itself are designed to scale and not just be a science project that isn't going to be able to be used at scale. And then last and most importantly is a security strategy. If we don't start with security in mind, then whatever applications are running on a cloud platform, you don't want those to become a security risk once you get down the road. So areas where Insight can help, really four areas. First, starting with assessment. If you're refactoring applications or looking at moving infrastructures to the cloud, you want to make sure that you know what you have and what can most effectively be moved to the cloud. Second, being able to implement applications, platforms, and infrastructure in the cloud and making sure that it's secure. Third is an innovation mentality where we help introduce possibilities that maybe customers haven't thought of in their application modernization journey. So a lot of times cloud is always changing and always innovating themselves, offering new services and platforms for our customers. So that's something that Insight can help with. And then the last, of course, is managing insecurity. Again, going back to cloud governance and securing a cloud and hybrid infrastructure, making sure that there aren't security holes and making the cloud a strategic asset instead of an attack vector. So just a quick note then on some of our AWS capabilities. Here's a list of our competencies, programs that we participate in our certifications. We are an AWS Advanced Consulting Partner, and some of the most interesting work that we do is actually kind of what we're talking about today, where we're able to take our AWS capabilities, our modern application capabilities, and bring in third-party partners and provide an application platform that's secure, scalable, and able to support all of your application needs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric Ewan, and we'll start with talking about Amazon EKS, and later on we'll be joined by Andy Gower to talk about how Portworx works with the AWS infrastructure and provides an extended platform.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Yuan. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, AWS. Today, I will present a high level of Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS. Then I will hand over to Andy to talk about Portworx and the different use cases. So what is Amazon EKS? EKS is an AWS managed service. It provides the flexibilities of Kubernetes with security and resiliencies of an AWS native service. EKS is just an upstream Kubernetes. We don't fork it in any ways other than sometimes backport some security patches, which means if you are running an open source version of Kubernetes, you will get the same version as EKS. AWS does lots of work to make it secure, reliable, and improve performance. Now we know what is EKS, but why AWS built EKS in the first place? Our goal is to make managing Kubernetes simple. At certain scales, running a self-managed Kubernetes will be really challenging because of the overhead. It takes time and resources away from core business applications. Running and scaling Kubernetes can be challenging. Also, securing Kubernetes can be a lot of work and effort. Those are things and heavy lifting you can offload to EKS. Then the possibilities to integrate with other AWS services securely and reliably is another good reason. With over 65% of organizations choose AWS to run their containers, you can imagine there are many Kubernetes clusters running on AWS, and the administrative effort required to support them. This is exactly where Portworx shines. It supports not only EKS in the cloud, but it is also Outpost and EKS Anywhere ready. Kubernetes admins no longer need to know nor deal with storage to leverage the power of data. They can simply request storage by requirements like amount, performance, and resiliency level, and let Portworx figure out all the details. Portworx includes core storage, backup, DR, migration, security, and infrastructure automation. Deploying Amazon EKS and Portworx together, now we have a new storage and data management dimension in our data plane. It looks to be more complex than before because of the extra dimension, but keep in mind, more options only means you can build an EKS cluster which is closer to what you really need. Depending on your organization's requirement, EKS together with Portworx, disaster recovery, and storage automation into your containerized environment. So with us to learn more about the different services on AWS, now I will hand off to Andy to go over Portworx and the use cases. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for really setting the stage for what we're going to talk about in the second half of this presentation. And before I jump in, many of you are familiar with Pure Storage, and I want to just kind of give you a quick note about Portworx and where we came from. So Portworx was acquired by Pure at the end of 2020. So we're part of the bigger Pure company. Pure, as many of you know, has global customers around the world. We've got over 1.6 billion in revenue in fiscal year 21. We continue to grow, and we're often seen as a leader in the Magic Quadrant and our NPS scores. And so Portworx fits nicely into everything that Pure has been doing to date, and just really helps us extend our story around everything we're doing in the storage and data management space. So with that, let's jump into that. And then what do we mean by storage and data management as it pertains to Kubernetes? And let's start by looking at the application development landscape and kind of where the market is. So I think we all know that data powers the businesses of tomorrow, and really it powers the businesses of today. This has been the case not only for a number of years, but it's something we've seen really accelerate in the past couple of years with COVID, with us moving to work from home, with us being more mobile and on the road. Data needs to be actionable. Data needs to be able to react in real time, and be able to rebook our flights immediately if they're canceled. We want to be able to order food from our phone and track it all the way until it's delivered out our front door. We want a notification on our phone if someone fraudulently tries to use our credit card. All of that is harnessing the power of data in real time, and that's what's powering successful businesses forward. And what's underpinning all of that is a new cloud native stack that lets you process that data into value and insight in real time. So that cloud native stack is built with a set of new data apps, distributed databases, data services, things like Elastic and Spark, things like Cloudera and Kafka, using app-driven automation like Kubernetes and containers, and built on a hybrid cloud infrastructure like AWS, both things like Outpost on-prem, as well as the public cloud, and being able to use that hybrid cloud infrastructure to maximize your value and insight. And it's also delivering a new set of people and processes, so things like GitOps and DevOps and data pipelines that are bringing new tools and processes to the way that we're interacting with our data and we're building our stack. Now, at the core of all this is containers and Kubernetes. Containers and Kubernetes is the heart of what's driving cloud native forward, and it's how cloud native happens. We know that 95% of new apps are being developed in containers. 78% of CNCF members are using Kubernetes in production today, and 85% are expecting to run containers in production by 2025. So Kubernetes and containers are really forming the foundation of harnessing this data and processing this data and making it successful in real time. And that's great, but there are some things we need to start thinking about as we move into a container and Kubernetes-based architecture and start to put more stateful production workloads into that architecture. You heard Eric hint at this a little bit. Initially, Kubernetes was not designed for state. It was designed for ephemeral applications. It was designed for this idea that you build applications once and you spin them up and then you spin them down and then you move on with your life. You're not using it for production workloads where data residency and data is required all the time. And so as a result, Kubernetes didn't address storage and data management out of the box. It's something it still doesn't do. It solves the orchestration problem, but it doesn't address things like data encryption and backup and recovery, or container granular provisioning, or high availability, or DR, business continuity. All these things that we know are imperative to deploying production workloads in our enterprises. And so we need to start thinking about, well, how can I do that? So Kubernetes lets me automate the application orchestration. What can I put on top of Kubernetes to automate some of the storage and data management? And so as we start thinking about that question, the most obvious thing that pops up is, well, why can't I use my existing tools? Why are the tools that I've been using for 20 years, why can't I just move them over to this new Kubernetes-centric world? And the answer is simple. So in that VM-based world, infrastructure was king. Infrastructure is what we tied everything to. So the apps lived forever. The infrastructure lived forever. So everything was provisioned to that specific storage array. We monitored the storage array. We backed up the storage array. We bought storage specifically because it had a set of features and functions that we needed for the application. We let storage drive the business, and that's how we built our architecture. And so the other parts of that world, the things we did for monitoring and backup and provisioning and for scaling, were all tied to the underlying storage. In the Kubernetes world, the application is king. And so everything we're doing is about how do we let the application come and go? How do we scale the application? How do we observe the application? How do we provision the application? How do we make sure that it can migrate to different places? The promise of Kubernetes is applications that are portable, elastic, agile, and modular. And so we need a set of storage tools that automates that world, that's built for the app-centric world, not for the infrastructure-centric world. And so what we started to see in the industry today are two approaches to this problem. There's the connector approach and the container native storage approach. The connector approach is all about saying, how do I take my existing infrastructure and leverage that CSI interface to run containers and Kubernetes on it? And that is an okay place to start. But what you'll quickly find out is you're still dependent on the underlying array for your common services, for your data services. You're still relying on that underlying array to scale the application. And most importantly, that storage array is managed independently from Kubernetes. It sits outside the Kubernetes control plane. And so you have this matching problem. You have this problem around automation because the application is being automated by Kubernetes, but the data is sitting outside of that Kubernetes control plane. And so managing those becomes quite a conundrum. The container native storage approach virtualizes that underlying storage and brings that storage pool into the Kubernetes control plane. And what that lets us do is it allows us to provide storage services that are container granular and app consistent and tied to the application itself. And so as we move the application, say, from a public cloud to local SSDs to a storage array and back to the public cloud. We don't have to worry about, do I have the right CSI driver? Do I have the right set of data services? Because everything is managed and provided inside the Kubernetes control plane. It's provided by the container native storage layer itself. So on the back of all that, that leads us to kind of, why we're here today. Why are Portworx and AWS here today? It's because we announced a strategic engagement earlier this year to do everything I just talked about, to take the power of AWS and everything that Eric talked about, the ease of which you can get started with Kubernetes, with a managed Kubernetes platform. You can just jump in and start writing code and leave the management of the Kubernetes platform to AWS. Now you bring Portworx along and you can leave the management of the storage and data services associated with that application to Portworx. So by putting Portworx and AWS together, you have a strong foundation to really jump into Kubernetes and go head on with your production workloads. So what does this look like? What does this actually mean in reality? So with Portworx, we are bringing our Kubernetes data services platform, which has been ranked the #1 Kubernetes data platform by GigaOM for 3 years in a row. We're bringing that platform with our container native storage, our backup, our DR, our migration, our security, our auto scaling to the AWS world. So being able to run that on top of any EKS location, EKS anywhere, EKS on the public cloud, EKS on Outpost, in any AWS region, and supporting any application, and making it simple and easy for you to deploy applications, manage applications, and secure applications within Amazon EKS. And there's really 4 main use cases that we like to call out where together we really, really drive value home. The first round is around disaster recovery and high availability. So with Portworx on top of AWS, we are able to provide multi-AZ, multi-region HA and DR. What that means is with our synchronous DR capability, you can have zero RPO zero RPO for your application. So very fast failover, very quick recovery for those mission critical applications. We also have asynchronous replication. So you can easily recover, say, from US East 1 to Australia East 2. So you can have a global recovery strategy and be able to quickly, again, have that business continuity that you require. We also bring backup and data protection to the table. So with Portworx, we're able to provide that app-consistent, container granular backup and restore with built-in RBAC and ransomware protection. What that means is we are protecting the data not only at rest, but also in flight. So the data is protected end-to-end as you are backing it up and restoring it from any AWS S3 endpoint. Next is data migration. So we know a lot of customers are either coming to AWS for the first time, or they're moving more and more applications to AWS, or they're moving their applications around their different AWS deployments. Again, with Portworx, you have a comprehensive set of tools, so you can automate that migration across region, across zone, across location from EKS anywhere on-prem to the public cloud, making it simple and easy for you to migrate that data across the board. And last but not least, we help optimize cost and performance. So with Portworx, we're able to intelligently deploy the underlying storage, and we can cut the operational cost of using the underlying storage by up to 60%. We can cut time to market from months to days. At this point, what I often hear from folks is, I'm using EBS. How does this fit into the EBS picture? How do I, what is Portworx bringing to the table to complement what EBS is doing? And I think this slide touches on a lot of what I talked about in the last slide, but it really shows kind of those different areas where EBS provides a very strong foundation, but bringing Portworx in allows you to do some additional things that you need for a production environment. So things like thin provisioning and high density support helps you optimize those costs we just talked about. Things like asynchronous replication lets you have that business continuity you require. And things like application optimized IO profiles helps to make sure that you're using the right underlying EBS volume for the right application. So you're using the correct IO profile, the correct persistent volume with the application, whether it's one that has high IO throughput or low IO throughput. We can do that matching and automate that matching in the back end. So the last slide I want to talk about quickly, I want to talk about one of our customers that we've been very successful with in production. That's Audi. So Audi came and said, hey, we want to be able to manage our cloud costs without sacrificing the agility that cloud delivers. We want to be able to go fully in production on AWS, but as always, budget is concerned. So what we're able to do is by bringing Portworx Store, we're able to provide that cloud-native storage layer to Audi. And then with the autopilot functionality, we're able to put rules in place so they could auto-scale up and down their application. So they could say, hey, when my application is using 50% of the underlying storage, please add 10% more capacity to my EBS volume. So by doing that, we're able to smooth out the storage provisioning, and we're able to help them save 60% on their underlying storage build. So just one example of how Portworx and AWS are working together to help bring value to customers and make it easy to go into production on Amazon EKS. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dean, and please feel free to reach out with any questions, and appreciate you guys taking the time to listen.
Thanks, Andy. That'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, everyone, for attending.